Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker and lover of flying cheese, meteorologist Jacob Dickey.
To the sea, to the air that we breathe, from the depths of the earth to the stars. Light up the world, run like you're born to fly. Live like you'll never die. Dare what you dare to dream, and everything in between.
It is incredible to be here at the Mississippi State FFA Convention and just get to experience what convention is all about. Very exciting. The past several sessions, we've had such great speakers, such inspiration, and I'm just really thankful to be here. So thank you for allowing me to speak to you here at convention. I want to share something real quick, a little bit. Right now, I've got these spotlights on me, and this is a little bit like being at the TV station that I work at, but the big difference is if I give a bad weather forecast, at home, I can't hear people complaining, but in here, I might get some boos if I mess up. Hopefully, we get some cheers and some applause in here. Kind of a cool setting for being here. I want to share a little bit first about myself and my experiences in FFA and caring to where I am and how I got to this point. I really think that the FFA truly has done so much for me to get me to where I am a meteorologist on TV. Sure, we think FFA is for farmers and ag kids and things of that. And while I may not have came from a traditional farm per se, I was one of those students who came into the FFA with bright eyes, excited and eager, and wanting to soak up as much as I could. As I grew through the FFA, I became more involved and really fell in love with what this organization does, from the Blue Jackets to the bright futures that we have here in our convention hall. I think one of the cool things, too, is that those leadership skills that I got, those skills of public speaking, they play a direct role into my career on TV. Even though I might not be in an ag-related field, I still use those skills that I learned in the Blue Jackets you are wearing today. One of the cool things about FFA is that we accept people of all types of backgrounds and experiences, and that's something where all of us in here have been able to get something from this convention. In addition to my FFA experience as a meteorologist, I had a background of loving the weather and getting so excited when thunderstorms would roar, when the tornado sirens were tested at noon. I was out the door listening to those. It was just a lot of really cool things and seeing how the weather works and getting involved in that. I think one of the cool things about my job today is that a year ago, I looked like this. 1 year ago. Just kidding. No, that was when I was younger. I would grow up and love to try the weather out in the weather maps. I had one of those dry erase walls there and a big old map, and I would draw on different things. Apparently in Mississippi, we have a cold front and a low pressure here, and some clouds off in Alabama. So, but I think we're enjoying the weather we have today, and even yesterday compared to what we could be in June. So that growing up, the weather was something that I was fascinated by and I fell in love with, and it led me to where the career I am today, where I get to work at a TV station with my dream job. I have it made. I do the weather on the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday nights. I get to do some special segments. I have one called WeatherWorks, where we just talk for 3 minutes. We call it the best 3 minutes of Sunday night television. And then we also have a segment called Cooking Up a Storm, where I get to cook food and eat it on TV, and we just have a lot of fun with that. But besides that, I get to really invest in the communities that we serve in Northeast Mississippi and really help people from different schools, FFA chapters, and really just pour into, because I really value what community has and what it means and how it offers so much to the people that it represents. I think for me, when I first moved to Mississippi back in 2016, the first thing that happened is I got out of my car, and it was in August, so I instantly started sweating. I had not had an experience like that because I grew up in Illinois, where we're in the north, a little cooler, a little drier. Down here, that Gulf moisture just makes it miserable from March till next March. It's always hot and humid, and that was a bit of a shock to me. But over my first year, I struggled a little bit to really invest into my community and find that niche. I struggled to really find what I wanted to do to get the people that I wanted. When it came down to it, it took about a year before I really started to find that investment, and it came down to the FFA alumni. We have FFA alumni chapters all across our state that are helping to support local chapters, and I think that is the key to success for us as chapters and us in making a difference in our communities. I found other sorts of community to build, whether it was through my church that I was getting involved in, meeting some people that influenced my life and helped me grow closer to Jesus. I got involved into the local community at schools, just helping students grow and develop. I got involved in whatever I could to build that community around me so I could pour what skills and opportunities I had, the knowledge I had, into the people around me. I think the cool thing about our communities is that we can make a difference in our communities and do some cool things because we matter when it comes to our communities. For me, I wanted to pour as much as I could because I cared about those people around me. I never thought that one day I would need those people to care about me so much and to lift me from the bottom of where I thought I couldn't get out to help me up. Now, a little bit of a backstory here. As a meteorologist and as a weather fanatic, I've been chasing storms all across the country since I got a driver's license. In fact, even before that, I would beg my dad to let us go. And my mom would hesitantly say yes, so we'd go out to the edge of town. We'd watch the storms roll in. 9-year-old me would come back, draw those weather maps, and get all excited, and then I'd wait for the next storms. Over the years, then I moved to Oklahoma in between Illinois and Mississippi and chased some storms there, really saw some incredibly powerful storms that left images I cannot forget in my mind. From there, then, I moved to Mississippi, started to find my community and invest in that, and at the station, they let me chase storms, which is absolutely cool and a little challenging given all the trees that we have, which makes it really hard to see. One day in March, we were expecting severe weather. We were thinking those storms were going to come across northeast Mississippi, and if I mention a town you live in or we've got some chapters, feel free to give a little applause because when it comes to being on TV, I mention a town, I hope someone's watching, but in here we have chapters from all across the state. Well, these particular storms were forecasted to form in areas like Alcorn County, Tippah County, Tishomingo County, Itawamba County. There we go. So up in that Northeast Federation, that's where the storms were forecasted to form. And we had our eyes tuned into that little area thinking some storms were going to pop. They would start spinning and potentially produce some tornadoes. So sure enough, I got in my car. I drove up north as fast as I could. The speed limit, of course. When I got up there, I was watching the sky, and you could see for miles the big thunderclouds in the springtime rising, boiling into the atmosphere. As those storms grew, we tuned in on some storms sitting north of Tupelo near a little town called Baldwin. And as those storms rolled on to the east, then it was my job to follow those storms and report back to the TV station. As I did so, then those storms carried east, and they got towards the state line, and I got to a little town called Red Bay, Alabama. At that point, driving into Red Bay, the storm sirens were wailing. People weren't able, you couldn't see anyone out in the town. It was just me driving through, the police cars on the edge, watching for the storms. And as I was driving through the town, all of the alarm bells, all of the sounds that could have gone off saying tornado were sounding in my car and in the community. A tornado missed the town of Red Bay, but it touched down and started tracking to the east towards the town of Russellville, Alabama. As it did so, I was following. I could see where it was, but storms here in the southeast have a tendency to be rain-wrapped and difficult to see. So I could tell in that rain, the tornado was there. As I drove to the east down the highway, I started seeing some damage, started seeing some signs that there was, in fact, a tornado on the ground. At this point, then, I had finished what I needed with the TV station. They had released me, and I decided to keep going further and further into Alabama to chase just on my own time for a little bit of fun since we were all clear in our viewing area. As I was driving along then through Russellville, I realized that the tornado was just in front of me. It had only been about a quarter mile because to my left, buildings were damaged. There were roofs damaged. The signs were blown down. There was clear evidence that the tornado had just come through because no one had even responded to that scene yet. The fire department, the ambulance, the police cars were still nowhere, and it was just me and the damage that was left behind in Russellville. As I came through, then it was raining hard, and I remember all of a sudden just hearing a loud boom in the car. And usually when you hear that, that's not a good sign. For me, that boom was my car getting hit by some debris that had been on the road. I had hit that debris, not seeing it in that rain, and I had lost control of the car and spun into the median. I was terrified. It was super scary being in that car and realizing that I had no control over that I had no control over what was going to happen in these next 3 seconds of my life, seeing things flash. I was just wondering how I was going to end up and if I would make it through. The good news is I'm standing here. I made it through that wreck, just had a few scratches. My car, though, it rolled through the ditch several times. And I remember as I was in the vehicle, holding on for dear life, thinking, oh boy, this isn't going to be good. When I landed in the car, my phone had flown out the window. Any other form of communication I had was gone. It was just me sitting in my car, catching my breath and realizing I'm all alone. As the fire trucks rolled up, I was sitting there, the rain falling, I was soaking wet, covered in mud. And I remember thinking, who's going to help? I had no way to call home. All my friends were 2.5 hours away. I knew nobody. And I was stuck in Alabama. Probably not a good thing. When it came down to it, though, the local community knew that I was there and I needed help, and they responded quickly. They came to my aid. They got me to the hospital to check me out. They brought me food. They really just picked me up and invested me in Russellville, Alabama, not even knowing who I was or what I was doing there. I got a lot of questions from the nurses in the hospital, like, what were you thinking? As I came through then, I finally was able to get hold of people several hours later, but I really remember just thinking to myself, how am I going to get out of this? I'm in a real pickle. As I finally got a hold of people, it was amazing to see that the people that I had poured into at my TV station, at home, at my church, through the FFA alumni, were so willing to pick me up, come get me, bring me back to Starkville, and help me as I adjusted to not having a car for the next couple of weeks. See, I had poured so much into these people because I loved them. I cared about them. I had never thought that those people would be there to pick me up when I needed them most. That's the beautiful thing about community. When we need people, we may not know when that is, but as we pour into them, there may be that time when they can pour into us. I think it's really cool to think about the communities that we have and that we're surrounded by here. We have the FFA community right in this room. That's one of the biggest communities that we can have because we all wear these blue jackets. We all care about the agricultural community. We all care about our home communities. We have a lot of power to make a difference because we matter. When it comes down to it, the diversity that we have, too, really makes our FFA communities a very special place. You see, the FFA isn't just for, farmers. It's for everyone. We welcome in the jocks, the nerds, the athletes. We welcome in everyone into this organization, and we wear those same blue jackets. And when we finish in high school, then we put on those alumni jackets to support those kids because we got a chance in the FFA because the alumni, the community around us, gave us that chance. That's why the alumni in the community of the FFA is such a cool thing. There's more communities around us, too. When we are in school, our classes, our schools, our grade levels, those are all types of communities. We have our neighborhoods. Those are a community. We have our towns. That's a community. We have people surrounding us that all make up our community, and the diversity of such is something that really is powerful. Now, when it comes down to the communities, I think one of the biggest examples that as a meteorologist we think about and how those communities came to help is back on April 27th, 2011. 2 days before all of us meteorologists knew that something was not right with the atmosphere. Many of you have lived through that day and know what I'm talking about because the atmosphere had this violentness that we didn't know about. It had this cruel sense of humor that was ready to wreak devastation, and we could see 2 days out that this was not going to be a good situation. 1 day out, every warning bell was sounding. We were terrified because we knew something was going to happen that we had never seen before in our lifetimes. The night before, meteorologists across the Southeast went on TV saying, "Danger, it's coming, be prepared." But that wasn't even enough for the devastation that was coming. You see, then the morning of, we had this line of storms come through, and it blew through, starting in Mississippi, through Alabama, off to Tennessee and Georgia. And that alone was so violent itself, but the atmosphere was not done yet. It had more waiting for us. That afternoon, then more supercells popped up. A supercell being a type of storm that is so powerful, it can drop tornadoes, hail, wind, anything that it wants to. And that afternoon, many of us here experienced firsthand, seeing the devastation in person or on TV, what had happened when those storms rolled on through. There's a really good book that I want to share with you here that really, I think, highlights some of the aftermath and even the experiences of that storm. And if you haven't read it before or heard of it, it's called What Stands in a Storm by Kim Cross. She does a tremendous job of capturing what the Southeast United States is all about, the communities that we live in, and how we came back from something that no one had ever seen in their lifetimes before. And if you don't mind, I want to go ahead and just read a little bit of chapter here, because I think there's a spot which, to me, I was reading one day and sitting out there. I was sitting in the hot summer sun reading this book, and it just brought me to tears because of the power of the communities in the Southeast that had to respond to that devastation. The days that followed were fueled by volunteers with coolers. Even as relief trucks filled with cans of beans and shelf-stable meat rolled into every battered town, so did a battalion of junior league bakers, backyard chefs, and Samaritans armed with spatulas. They rolled into town after devastated town, towing grills the size of campers. Cooks of all stripes, tied on their aprons, stepped up to the plate and filled it. There were faith groups that set up buffet lines under tents in church parking lots, families from small towns that had been spared, professional chefs who offered free meals at their restaurants, students who fired up their backyard grills and cooked all of the meat from their neighbors' melting freezers. They did that because food is love. Because they know that dragging branches and lifting boards could not be done on an empty stomach in the South. It was what Rita Truel could give of herself, and she joined a few friends from a small-town church to drive to Smithville, Mississippi, devastated by an EF5. From the looks on the spread in front of her, she was not alone in her ability to help and cope through baking and food. When she put a call out for the storm, the answer came strong and sweet. She said, "I need some cakes for these people." She had 21 come to her house within hours. In Tuscaloosa, a man with a grill and a trailer loaded with groceries tried driving into Alberta City. The National Guardsmen stopped him at a roadblock. Only residents were being allowed in. So the man found a grassy median by the river and parked his grill in the middle of 4-lane Jack Warner Parkway. People saw him and honked and pulled over to help. Before long, he was feeding the National Guard, and they got him into Alberta City. He set up a tent in a strip mall parking lot, a staging area surrounded by devastation. Soon he had neighbors who had been devastated by the storms, people from all over helping him. The tent sprang up like wild mushrooms after a rain, and together they merged into a phenomenon that felt like the cross between a food court and a melting pot. The Germans from the Mercedes plant brought a cooking team that built burgers like a well-oiled assembly line. An army of Baptists teamed up and did prep work. The Methodists were in charge of deliveries. A group of Muslims had grilled side by side with football coaches. The only walls between them were built out of clear stacks of cases upon cases of water. Their culinary resources knew no limits. If it didn't move, they grilled it. In the storm-whipped town of Valonia, Arkansas, 2,000 volunteers showed up to pitch in. 2,000 volunteers. The Senior Citizen Center became the headquarters of help, and those who ran it, retired teachers, moms, anyone, somehow found a way to feed 1,200 people 3 square meals a day. People gave what they could. Nothing was too big or too small. Hair bows for Hackleburg, free haircuts in Pleasant Grove, portrait sessions for families whose memories were stolen by the wind. A 13-year-old girl from Arkansas found a temporary home for a family. 5 friends in Mississippi filled a truck. Someone brought a brand new house for a person he would never meet. A man who had lost everything to his own life's storms, a divorce, a lost job, a wreck that left him in a wheelchair, gave blood. It was all he could do. What would happen if we responded to every crisis in our communities much like we did on that day? You see, the crises in our communities, they don't always look like a wall of wind coming down our streets. Instead, they look like the gas station attendant who, a single mom, has to have 2 jobs and still can't have enough food for her family. They look like the kid in the class that sits next to us. He may look fine, but the emotional scars of abuse that are there are haunting him every single day and every single night. It might be the nursing home just down the road from our school where people go for the last years of their lives, where they struggle to feel loved and accepted. It won't look like a cloud. Those crises are in our communities to this day, and we as the FFA have a chance to respond to those. I think one example of such is I got to talk to some students in Manhatchee, and Manhatchee really does a cool thing in their community. I think they really symbolize what the FFA is all about. The advisors there, Mr. Franks and Mr. Rogers, really believe in their community, and they push their students to help and find those crises and to help people in times of need. See, I was talking to some of the students, and they had told me that in one instance, a student had lost their house in a fire, so the chapter met. They decided, we want to help this person that's in our community, and so they gathered money, clothes, anything they could to help. There's other things like working at the local nursing home, helping out, being a friend to people, really encouraging others that Mr. Franks and Mr. Rogers really encourage their students to do. I think it's so cool to hear about that because the Manhatchee FFA knows that they matter, that we all have that community that we so need. Now, when it came down to it, in 2014, a tornado went through their community, and it affected their FFA chapter. The 2 advisors had their homes, they were directly impacted by that tornado as it passed through. And the thing about it is that even still that Mr. Rogers and Mr. Franks had their homes done, Mr. Rogers was out in Oklahoma getting ready, heading that way for the land use contest. He was with students, they got the call, and so they coordinated, and Mr. Franks said, I'll check on your family and your house for you. You just keep going. Even though Mr. Franks' house was hit by that tornado, his yard had damage, he still went to his friend's house to help out. And I think the community in that moment saw the impact that they had made in their communities, that the FFA chapter had supported them so much that they came out in droves to help the FFA chapter rebuild. They had lost some barns, some trees were down. The community, from the people at the nursing home who were helping, from the people who had been affected by the fire, anyone that had been touched was coming together to help them in their time of need. We all have that potential in our chapters to find those crises. Those crises are around us. We have to open our eyes to see them. They don't look like that wall of wind. It's that student sitting next to us in class. They don't look like a cloud coming down the street. It's the food bank being low on food, supporting people who don't have enough to eat. The crises in our communities are everywhere. And the thing is that we as FFA members have the tools, the resources, the skills to make a difference, because all of us coming together in the blue jackets with our diverse backgrounds, our skills, we can make a difference. We have that potential to address the crises that maybe we didn't cause, but we can bring those solutions to the table. When it comes down to it, we as FFA members, as advisors, as alumni, have so much potential to make a difference in our communities because we matter